There's a word the old philosophers used that doesn't really translate into English. Eudaimonia. People try to call it happiness, but that's not it. Happiness comes and goes. It shows up when the bills are paid and the kids are laughing, and it leaves the second the phone rings with bad news. Eudaimonia is something else entirely. It's a soul that is well, even when the day is not. It's a life that is flourishing from the inside out, regardless of what's pressing in from the outside. And here's the thing I want to say to you before we go any further. Most people will chase happiness their whole lives and never once taste this. But the ones God has set apart, they were built for it. You were built for it. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why. I'm George. I've spent more years than I can count sitting with people in the hardest moments of their lives across kitchen tables, in hospital waiting rooms, on porches at midnight when sleep wouldn't come for either of us. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the people who carry a deep, unshakable wellness in their spirit are almost never the people you'd expect. They're not the richest. They're not the ones whose lives look easy from the outside. Some of them have been through things that would break a normal person clean in half, and yet there's a steadiness in them, a light that doesn't flicker. I used to wonder what they had that everyone else was missing. It took me a long time to understand. They weren't happier. They were anchored, and there's a world of difference between the two. Let me tell you what eudaimonia actually is, in plain words, because the philosophers made it sound complicated, and it isn't. Imagine an acorn. Inside that acorn is the full blueprint of an oak tree, the height, the roots, the way the branches will one day spread wide enough to shade a whole yard. The acorn isn't flourishing when it's just sitting in a drawer. It flourishes when it becomes what it was always meant to be, when it grows into the exact thing it was designed to grow into. That's eudaimonia. It's not a feeling, it's a becoming. It's the deep satisfaction of a life lived in line with what it was created for. And that's why so many people miss it. They keep trying to feel better, when what their soul is actually crying out for is to become who they were made to be. Think about that for a second. You can have everything the world says should make you happy, and still lie awake at 2 a.m. with a hollowness in your chest you can't explain. The promotion came, the house got bigger, the vacation photos looked perfect, and still that ache, that sense that something's off, that you're living a life that fits you about as well as a borrowed coat. Most people never figure out what that ache is. They think they need more, so they chase more, and the ache just follows them, quiet and patient, into every new thing they acquire. The ache isn't a malfunction. The ache is a compass. It's pointing you toward the life you were actually built for, and away from the one you've been settling for. I want to take you somewhere. There's a man in the Bible most people skip right over, and his name is Gideon. When we meet him, he's hiding, literally hiding. He's down in a wine press, a low, sunken pit where you'd normally crush grapes, and he's threshing wheat down there in the dark, trying to keep the enemy from seeing him and stealing it. Picture that. A grown man, crouched in a hole, doing his work in secret because he's terrified. That's where he is. That's his whole life right now, small, scared, hidden, surviving day to day and hoping nobody notices him. And then an angel shows up and says something that must have sounded like a cruel joke. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Mighty warrior. Gideon's in a pit. Gideon's hiding from his enemies. And God calls him a mighty warrior. Now here's what most people miss when they read that. God wasn't describing what Gideon was. God was describing what Gideon was made to be. The acorn doesn't look like an oak, but the oak is already in there. God looked past the trembling man in the pit and spoke to the warrior who hadn't woken up yet. And that right there is the first reason the chosen ones can reach this flourishing that everyone else misses. They're not measured by what they're doing in the pit. They're measured by what they were planted to become. Heaven sees the oak. And here's where it gets real. Gideon argues. Of course he argues. He says basically, "You've got the wrong guy. My family's the weakest. I'm the least of them. If God's really with us, why is everything falling apart?" And God doesn't sit there and debate his theology. God just says, "Go in the strength you have." Not the strength you wish you had, not the strength you're waiting to feel, the strength you already have, right now, in the pit. Because the chosen aren't the ones who feel ready. They're the ones who move before they feel ready, trusting that the becoming happens in the going. You don't wait to feel like the oak before you start growing. You grow, and the strength shows up on the way. Now let me bring this home. Because maybe Gideon feels like a long time ago and a long way away. Let me tell you about a season in my own life I don't talk about much. Years ago, I went through a stretch where everything I'd built felt like it was crumbling. I won't get into all of it, but there was a particular night I remember it, because it was raining hard. And I was sitting in my car in an empty grocery store parking lot at almost midnight, because I couldn't make myself go home and face the quiet. I had done everything I thought I was supposed to do. I'd been faithful. I'd worked hard. I'd prayed. And it felt like the floor had dropped out from under all of it. And sitting there, with the rain coming down so loud I couldn't hear myself think, I asked God the question I think a lot of you have asked at 2 a.m., with the ceiling staring back at you. Why does it feel like the harder I try to do right, the harder everything gets? And no voice answered. The rain just kept falling. But something settled in me anyway, not an answer. Exactly. More like a hand on the shoulder. And what I understood, slowly, over the months that followed, was this. I had been chasing happiness. I'd been trying to arrange my life so I'd feel good. And every time the feeling slipped away, I thought I'd failed. But that night in the parking lot was the beginning of something else. It was the night I stopped asking God to make me feel better and started asking God to make me into who I was supposed to be. And here's the strange part. That's the night the flourishing actually started. Not when things got easier. They didn't get easier for a long while. It started when I stopped confusing comfort with purpose. That's the second reason the chosen reach eudaimonia, and most people don't. The world teaches you to organize your whole life around feeling good. And so the minute life stops feeling good, the world's people fall apart, because the only thing holding them together was the feeling. But the ones God has marked, they learn to organize their lives around becoming good, around growing into the person heaven planted them to be. And a person built on becoming can weather a storm that would level a person built on feeling. When the feeling goes, they're still standing, because the feeling was never the foundation. The purpose was. The calling was. The slow, quiet becoming was. Let me say something here that might step on some toes, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I think you can handle it. A lot of people are addicted to comfort, the way other people are addicted to anything else. They've built their entire existence around avoiding discomfort. Anything hard, they run from. Anything that stretches them, they quit. And then they wonder why their lives feel so small. You cannot flourish in a life you've built entirely around not being uncomfortable. The oak doesn't grow tall by avoiding the wind. The wind is part of how the roots go deep. And here's what most people miss: the very thing they're running from is the thing that would have grown them. They keep fleeing the wind, and the wind was sent to make them unshakable. I want to tell you about someone else now. Not a Bible figure this time. A woman I knew years ago. I'll keep her anonymous out of respect, but I think about her often. She'd had a hard life. The kind of hard you don't recover from quickly. She'd lost more than anyone should have to lose, and lost it young. And by every measure the world uses, she should have been bitter. She should have been hollow. But she wasn't. I remember sitting with her on her front step one afternoon. She had these flower pots lined up along the railing, marigolds, bright orange, and she was deadheading the spent blooms while we talked, and I finally asked her. I said, "How are you not angry?" After everything, and she didn't even look up from the flowers. She just said, "George, I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to let what happened to me decide who I became." And she kept pinching off the dead blooms, calm as anything. I've never forgotten that. Because that's it. That's the whole thing. She had taken the one power that nobody could take from her, the power to decide who she became, and she'd refused to surrender it, even to her own grief. And that's the third reason, friend. The chosen ones understand that flourishing isn't something that happens to you. It's something you participate in. It's a partnership. God plants the oak in the acorn, yes, but you have to be willing to grow. You have to keep deciding, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, who you're going to become. That woman on the front step was more whole than people I've known, who never lost a thing. Because she'd done the deep work of becoming, and they'd only ever done the shallow work of acquiring. And here's something the scripture means when it talks about being conformed to an image, being shaped, slowly, into a particular likeness. Most people read that and think it's about behavior, following rules. But it's deeper than that. It's about formation. It's about a soul being shaped, over time, into the fullness it was always meant to carry. And you cannot be shaped without pressure. Ask anyone who's ever worked with clay. The shape doesn't come from the clay deciding to be a bowl. It comes from the hands and the pressure and the turning. And maybe, just maybe, some of the pressure you've been resenting in your life isn't punishment at all. Maybe it's the hands. Maybe it's the shaping. Maybe the very season you've been begging God to take away is the season He's using to make you into the thing you've always longed to be. Let me pause here, because I think some of you needed to hear that more than you'll admit. You've been treating your hard season like a detour, like a mistake, like proof that something went wrong. And what if it's not? What if it's the workshop? What if everything you've walked through, the losses, the long waits, the prayers that seemed to bounce off the ceiling, what if none of it was wasted, and all of it was forming something in you that comfort never could have? The people who flourish are not the people who avoided the workshop. They're the people who let themselves be shaped in it. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you. Before you ever arrive, things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the awakening map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. You can access it through the QR code on your screen, or through the link pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. There's another man I keep coming back to, and his story sits right on top of everything I've been telling you. Joseph. Most people know the colorful coat and the famous ending, where he stands in front of his brothers as a ruler and forgives them. But almost nobody sits in the middle of his story, where the real becoming happened, and the middle is brutal. He's been sold by his own brothers. He's been carried off to a foreign country where he doesn't speak the language. He works his way up in a man's house, does everything right, stays faithful, and gets thrown into prison anyway, for something he didn't do. And then this is the part that wrecks me. He helps a fellow prisoner, interprets a dream for him, and asks one small thing in return. Remember me when you get out. And the man gets out. And the man forgets him. 2 more years. 2 more years Joseph sits in that prison, forgotten, while the one person who could have helped him goes on with his life, like Joseph never existed. Sit in that for a second. Sit in the forgetting, because I think a lot of you know exactly what that feels like, to do everything right and still end up in the pit. To help someone and be forgotten. To wait and wait while it seems like heaven has lost your address. And here's what I need you to see. Those 2 forgotten years in the prison were not God losing track of Joseph. They were the workshop. The arrogant boy who'd bragged about his dreams to his brothers could not have run a nation and forgiven his enemies. But the man who came out of that prison could. The pit didn't ruin Joseph. The pit finished him. And when he finally stood at the top, he looked back at all of it, the betrayal, the slavery, the prison, the forgetting, and he said something that should change how you read your own story. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Same events, same losses, same long, dark wait. Read one way, it's a tragedy. Read the way Joseph learned to read it, it's the very making of him. And that, friend, is the difference between the people who flourish and the people who stay bitter. Not what happened to them, what they decided it meant. Now I want to go back to something, because I don't want you to walk away thinking flourishing means you'll never hurt again. That's not it. That's not it at all. Let me show you. Elijah, the great prophet, the one who called down fire from heaven, who stood against an entire kingdom, and there's a moment, right after his greatest victory, where he's sitting under a tree in the wilderness, completely spent, and he asks God to just let him die. Read that again. This is the mountaintop man, the fire from heaven man, and the day after the biggest win of his life, he's so exhausted and so low that he wants it to be over. How does that happen? How do you go from the mountaintop to wanting to die in a single day? Here's how. Because flourishing and feeling are not the same thing, and Elijah, in that moment, was confusing the two. He'd had the win. The feeling came, and the feeling went, the way feelings always do. And when the feeling left, the emptiness rushed in so hard he didn't know what hit him. But watch what God does. God doesn't lecture him. God doesn't say, "How dare you, after all I just did through you." God lets him sleep. God feeds him. God lets him rest, twice. And only then, gently, does God speak. And when God finally speaks, it's not in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. It's in a whisper, a low, quiet voice. Because the chosen don't learn the deepest things in the spectacular moments. They learn them in the quiet, in the recovery, in the gentle whisper that comes after the storm has passed. And that's the 4th reason. The ones who reach this deep wellness have learned that the whisper is where the real life is. Everybody wants the fire from heaven. Everybody wants the mountaintop. But the mountaintop is a feeling, and the feeling fades. The whisper, the still, low voice that meets you in your exhaustion and feeds you and tells you to rest, that's where eudaimonia actually lives. Not in the spectacular, in the steady. Most people are so busy chasing the next fire that they sleep right through the whisper. And the whisper was the whole point. Let me ask you something, and really sit with it. When was the last time you let yourself rest? Not collapse rest. There's a difference. Collapse is what happens when you've run yourself so far into the ground that your body finally forces you to stop. Rest is something you choose, on purpose, as an act of trust. The world will tell you that rest is laziness, that flourishing means hustle. means more, means never stopping. But the people I've known who carry that unshakable wellness, they know how to rest. They know that the field that's never allowed to lie fallow eventually grows nothing at all. They know that even God rested. And if rest was good enough for the one who made the whole thing, who are we to think we're too important to need it? I think about that woman with the marigolds, deadheading her flowers on a slow afternoon, completely at peace. She wasn't hustling. She wasn't striving. She'd been through more than most. And she'd come out the other side with a stillness that the busy people I knew would have killed for. She'd learned the whisper. She'd learned to rest. She'd learned that her worth wasn't in what she produced, but in who she was becoming. And she was flourishing, right there on her front step, with her hands in the dirt and her heart at peace, in a way that no amount of money or success could ever have manufactured. Here's something else most people get backwards. They think the flourishing comes first, and then they'll be able to give. When I'm finally okay, when I finally have enough, then I'll have something to offer. But it works the other way around. The giving is part of how you flourish. The acorn that becomes the oak, what does the oak do? It gives shade. It drops more acorns. It becomes the thing that shelters and feeds everything around it. A life that only takes, that only acquires, that only protects itself, that life never flourishes, no matter how much it gathers. It just gets fuller and emptier at the same time. But the life that's been shaped, that's been through the workshop, that's learned the whisper, that life starts to overflow. And the overflow isn't a drain on the flourishing. The overflow is the flourishing. You become the oak when you start to shade others. I've seen this so many times it's almost a law. The people who are the most well, the most whole, the most at peace, they're almost always pouring out into someone else. They've stopped asking, what can I get? And started asking, what can I give? And somewhere in that turn, something cracked open in them, and the wellness started flowing. It's the great reversal at the heart of everything Jesus taught. You find your life by losing it. You get full by emptying out. You flourish by giving yourself away. The world has it exactly backwards, and so the world stays exactly empty, no matter how hard it grasps. Let me come back to you now, because this whole time I've really only been talking about one person, and that person is you. Maybe you've been chasing happiness for years and wondering why it keeps slipping through your fingers. Maybe you've done everything right, and you're sitting there with that ache in your chest, wondering what's wrong with you. I want you to hear me. There's nothing wrong with you. That ache is not a defect. That ache is the oak in the acorn, straining toward the light. That ache is your soul telling you it was made for more than the small, comfortable feeling chasing life you've been settling for. And the fact that you felt it, the fact that you couldn't be satisfied by all the things that satisfy everyone else, that's not your curse. That's the mark of the chosen. You were never going to be content with less, because you were built for more. And here's the part nobody tells you. The reason most people never reach this flourishing isn't that they're not capable of it. It's that they quit too early. They feel the ache, they get a few feet into the workshop, the shaping starts to hurt, and they bolt. They run back to comfort. They go find another thing to acquire, another feeling to chase, and they spend the rest of their lives wondering why the ache never goes away. The chosen are not the ones with less ache. They're the ones who stayed, who let themselves be shaped, who kept growing, even when the growing hurt, who learned to rest, learned to give, learned to listen for the whisper, instead of always demanding the fire. You are closer than you think. The very fact that this message reached your spirit and not just your ears, the very fact that something in you has been nodding along this whole time, that tells me the oak is already stirring. You're not at the beginning. You're further down the road than you've given yourself credit for. The losses you thought disqualified you were actually forming you. The long waits you resented were actually deepening your roots. The seasons you begged God to end were actually the workshop, and you came out of them carrying something most people will never have. You just haven't recognized it yet. So let me leave you with this. The flourishing you've been chasing was never going to come from getting your circumstances to line up just right. It was always going to come from becoming who you were made to be, and you've been becoming her. Becoming him. This whole time, even on the days it felt like falling apart. Especially on those days. The acorn doesn't flourish in the drawer where it's safe. It flourishes in the ground, in the dark, under the pressure, where the shaping happens. And you, my friend, have been in the ground, which means you're not dying. You're growing. You always were. Now I want to hear from you. And I want you to be specific, because this matters. Somewhere in this message there was a moment that landed harder than the rest. Maybe it was Gideon in the pit, being called a warrior. Maybe it was the woman with the marigolds deciding who she'd become. Maybe it was the parking lot in the rain. Maybe it was the whisper after the storm. Tell me which one it was. And tell me this too. What's the one season in your life you've been treating as a detour that you're now wondering might have been the workshop? Write it down in the comments. Name it, because the moment you can name it as the place where you were being shaped, instead of the place where you were being broken, that's the moment the oak finally remembers what it was always meant to be.